Well, hello, this is Mr. Ippolito, and today we're going to talk about the Bill of Rights, what it means to you, what it means to us as Americans. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by sharing my screen. Let's go ahead and begin. So the Bill of Rights is, of course, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. These were the first 10 amendments that were ratified in 1791. And because they all kind of were ratified at the same time as one package deal, we refer to them as the Bill of Rights. Now, who determines what the Bill of Rights means in our country? Well, we weren't sure at first when the Constitution was first written, but with the Marbury versus Madison Supreme Court case in 1803, the Supreme Court said, you know what, we're going to be the ones to determine what is constitutional and what is not. If you remember, that is a power called judicial review. And so the Supreme Court decides ultimately what is constitutional and what is not. But the court system, the Supreme Court especially, always tries to balance the rights of the individual with the needs of society. There's a saying, and I'm going to stop my share so I can give you this saying. There's a saying that goes something like this: my fist ends where your nose begins, something like that. In other words, you can kind of do what you want. In our country, you have the freedom to do what you want until it interferes with the rights and freedoms and safety of others, right? So, for example, just one easy example, here in the city of Santa Clarita, we have a noise ordinance, which means after a certain time, I think it's 10 p.m. on weeknights and 11 p.m. on weekends, you got to turn your music down. You have to, if you're having a party or gathering, which you shouldn't be doing right now in a pandemic, but if you're having a party or a gathering and it's really loud, you got to bring everybody inside. You got to bring that noise down. It's not because we're trying to limit people's freedom or inhibit the ability of people to have fun. It's because you're having fun at a late hour is preventing other people from getting sleep. They have to work the next day or they have to go to school the next day. And so that is really each time when we have these debates within our country, and let me go ahead and back to the screen share here, we're always trying to balance the needs of the individual, the rights of the individual with the needs of the society, right? So trying to figure out how do we protect the needs of the individual person, but at the same time protecting the needs and the rights of the whole as well. Let's go ahead and start off with the First Amendment. There are 5 freedoms of the First Amendment, and if you're filling out your portion of the Constitution Interactive Notebook, you'll see over on the left-hand side, boom, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, speech, religion, press, petition, and assembly. So I want to talk to you about each of these so you understand each one of these in depth. And when you're filling out the Constitution Interactive Notebook, you'll want to just write more than just freedom of speech, freedom of religion. Like, you want to put some details in there to let me know that you truly understand what each of these means. Okay, so first of all, let's start with freedom of speech. Uh, the First Amendment says Congress shall make no laws abridging the freedom of speech. So what does this really mean in our country? Here's what it means to us. You can say any political belief. Most political speech, if you're expressing your political opinion, that is protected. And that's intentional because that's how we operate in a democratic society, is we protect people's rights to speak out, whether you are in favor of a particular political idea or candidate or leader, or you're opposed to them. We want to be able to protect that political speech. You can protest. You can say things about someone that are true, even if they're not kind, even if it's, not the best thing. You're talking about somebody, perhaps they were involved in a scandal, or they did something awful, they committed a crime. You can say true things about people. That is protected speech, as long as it's true. If it's false, we'll get into that. You can burn the flag. That is protected political speech. There was a time in our country when I was growing up in the 80s and early 90s where there was talk of, there were some people who wanted to make flag burning illegal, and there were laws that made flag burning illegal. Those were overturned because the courts ruled that that was unconstitutional. And even if you burn a flag, which is a very unpatriotic act, an act that could be considered anti-American, that is still your freedom of speech that is protected. You can burn the American flag as out of protest. You can say racist and hate slogans. That is protected speech. I'm not saying it's nice, but I'm saying that it is protected. So the KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, that is an organization that was started right after the Civil War to try to intimidate, excuse me, intimidate blacks in the South. And prevent them from voting and preventing them from exercising their political rights. That was the KKK. Unfortunately, is still around today. They will get a permit to march in a parade or to have a rally. They can say, white supremacists can say racist and hateful things, but it's still their protected political speech as long as it's peaceful. Free speech means someone might say something you disagree with, but of course there are also limits. So just some examples here. First of all, what you can't do, you can't threaten to blow up airplanes, schools, or the president, right? If you're making threats of any kind, that is not protected speech. You cannot, quote, incite imminent lawless action. If you remember the Supreme Court case, the Schenck case, the guy in World War I who was handing out those flyers telling young men, resist the draft, do not go to war. This is how you can get out of serving your country. You can't do that. The Supreme Court said that you can't do that. If your words are going to incite imminent lawless action or danger, this is another phrase from that Supreme Court case, you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. In other words, if your speech is going to potentially harm others, then that may not be protected speech. I'll give you an example that is very current. The actions of January 6, 2021, when there were those people who stormed the United States Capitol. Right now, our system of law and justice is trying to determine, were there people whose words incited other people to commit that imminent lawless action? If that can be proven in a court that those people incited imminent lawless action, then even though those people may not have stormed the Capitol themselves, they can be still be held accountable for their words, for inciting a mob, for inciting insurrection in the country. So free speech has limits. Sexual harassment and other forms of harassment, you can't just harass someone. That is not protected speech. You can get sued. You can lose your job. You can get punished in a school setting for that. So sexual harassment and other kinds of harassment, not protected speech. Vulgar or obscene language in public. There are some city ordinances, county ordinances, local laws, in other words, that say that in public places where children are present, you can't use certain kinds of vulgar or obscene language. And of course, your speech is more limited in school. You remember that because in the Bong Hits for Jesus case, the Frederick v. Morse Supreme Court case, where the kid with his friends, the high school senior, held up that sign that says Bong Hits for Jesus, that is promoting drug use in a school setting. That is limited as well. And the reason why you can't just say whatever you want or wear whatever clothing you want is because the other people at school are minors. They're kids, they're children, and they have to be there. School is mandatory, right? And so they have to, whatever clothing you're wearing, whatever speech you are saying, they're forced to be there and they're forced to look at it or listen to it. So we as school officials have been given the power to limit certain types of speech in school that might offend other students or maybe harassing to other students, or that simply promote drug or alcohol use. For those reasons, that kind of speech can be limited in a school setting. Okay, let's now talk about freedom of religion. So the quote from the First Amendment: Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. There are two parts to freedom of religion. I want to make sure that you understand this. Two clauses. There's the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Two different parts, and I want to make sure you understand both. So here we go. First of all, the Establishment Clause says that government cannot promote one religion over another, right? So, and the reason I show this picture, these are either Pilgrims or Puritans here in this painting, and I'm not quite sure which, but in both the Pilgrim, they were the Separatists who landed in Plymouth, Massachusetts. They were the ones who celebrated the first Thanksgiving in 1621. Both the Separatists, who were the Pilgrims, and the Puritans, they both believed in state-sponsored religion. In other words, a portion of their tax dollars should go to the majority religion of that society. We do not believe in that today, so we have a different opinion on that, and that is what the Establishment Clause is all about. So here's what you can do under the Establishment Clause. You can teach about religion in school. In social studies, we do it all the time, right? 7th grade history, you learn about medieval Europe. You learn about the Catholic Church, the role of the Catholic Church. So we can teach about religion. We teach about Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, all different faith systems, belief systems around the world. We can teach about religions. We can allow voluntary prayer. You can, it's a little bit different in distance learning, but when we're back in a traditional setting, If you want to have voluntary prayer time outside of class time, then you're allowed to do that. We can provide for what's called limited open forum for a Bible club. There are several schools that have Bible study clubs. And so you can do that as long as the teacher is not actively participating. It can only be students that are participating in like a Bible study club or a club that's affiliated with any kind of religious belief system. We can teach about the Bible in public schools for cultural or literacy content. In other words, in many schools in the Heart District, we have a class called Bible as Literature. Because the Bible, which of course is the holy book of Christianity, because the Bible has been such a source of cultural significance for the Western world, for Europe, and for the United States, we can teach the Bible in a public school. This whole thing, by the way, we're talking about public school, right? Private schools, religious schools, they have these rules don't apply to them because it's not taxpayer money that is going to fund those private schools. We're talking about public schools here. So you can take a class called Bible as Literature in high school as an English elective. And then finally, sing religious songs for cultural significance in choir. Again, that's at a public school, right? So at public schools, if you wanted to sing songs about Jesus being born around Christmas time, you can do that because they're culturally significant. And so you might have songs at a winter concert that, Hanukkah songs or Christmas songs that discuss religious belief or connect to religious cultural significance, traditions, celebrations. You can do that. That is okay under the Establishment Clause. But here's what you cannot do. You can't have a state-sponsored religion, a government-sponsored religion. Can't have government money, taxpayer money, going to support any one particular religion, church, or belief system. You can't order anyone to say a prayer. So this is sometimes in public high school sports, this is where coaches sometimes get in trouble. Let's say that there's a prayer circle before the big game, before the big football game or big basketball game. In a public school, you can't do that. You can't have a prayer circle. It happens frequently, but it's not supposed to happen in public schools because, again, there's not supposed to be any kind of state-sponsored religion, government-sponsored religion, and according to the courts, the way that they interpret the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, is when you have a public school doing any kind of prayer that is either led by a teacher or coach or even just sanctioned, like, hey, you guys go ahead and you huddle up and you pray. If it is sanctioned, if it is allowed by the teacher or coach, before a game, and it's kind of expected that all the players are going to circle up and join this prayer, not allowed. You cannot teach religious doctrine in school. In other words, I could not lead a prayer before a test. Dear Lord, please protect these children as they go into this test and help them to do their best. Amen. I can't do that because I can't infuse any religious doctrine. I can't teach you or tell you what to believe or how to believe. And then finally, this happens sometimes in biology classes. You cannot teach creationism or intelligent design in a science class, right? So if you're going to teach students the science of evolution, for example, you can't infuse that's evolution, but here's what the Bible says. You can't do that in a science class. Okay. Speaking of free exercise of religion, and part of the reason why this was included, the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause, was because of Thomas Jefferson. He wrote the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. This is all background information, but I think it's important for you to understand. Thomas Jefferson said, Almighty God hath created the mind free, that all attempts to influence it by government tend only to beget habits of hypocrisy and meanness. Thomas Jefferson was not Christian. Thomas Jefferson was deist. A deist is someone who believes in God in general or a higher power in general, but not necessarily the specific beliefs of the Bible or of Christianity, right? So Thomas Jefferson might not necessarily believe in the story of Jesus and, how Christians believe that Jesus came to redeem the sins of humanity, right? But someone like Thomas Jefferson or Benjamin Franklin, who was also a deist, would believe in the idea of a higher power in general. So because Thomas Jefferson did not belong to the majority religion in America, which was Christianity and still is Christianity, I think that was part of the reason why Thomas Jefferson was so eager to protect religious rights, especially the rights of religious minorities, because he, in fact, was a part of the religious minority. I want to point this out because I think this is interesting. He was so proud of this statute that he wrote in 1779. By the way, there's a difference between a statue and a statute. A statue is like bronze or marble, like statue, right? A statute with an extra T in there, that is a law. So he was very proud of this statute that he wrote in 1779. The statute inspired part of the First Amendment, one of only 3 accomplishments that he wanted on his gravestone, on his tombstone, right? So if you take a look at this tombstone here, here was buried Thomas Jefferson, author of the Declaration of Independence, of the Statute of Virginia for Religious Freedom, and father of the University of Virginia. Those he considered his top 3 accomplishments, freedom of religion being one of those. What didn't make the list? Well, he was our first Secretary of State, didn't make the list. He was our second Vice President of the United States, didn't make the list. He was our third President of the United States, didn't make the list. You better believe that if I ever become President of the United States, I'm putting it on my tombstone. But Thomas Jefferson believed so much in freedom of religion that he put that on his tombstone over being President of the United States. So I think that says something about how important this was to Thomas Jefferson, freedom of religion. Okay, so in terms of free exercise, here's what you can do. You can choose whatever religion you want in our country. Of course, we would take that, that's duh. Absolutely, you can be whatever religion you want or no religion at all. You can lead a prayer in a public area. That's fine. On public ground, in public space, you can lead a prayer. You can ask questions about religions. You can question. You can't do that in every country, but you can, of course, in the United States. You can worship whatever you want with whomever you wish. Here's what you can't do. You can't break the law and claim it is religious belief. There are some religions that may claim, for example, some of the Native American tribes of the Southwest smoke peyote, which is a hallucinogenic drug, to try to gain a greater level of spiritual awareness, I think. That is, the courts have ruled that you cannot smoke illegal hallucinogenic drugs as part of a religious ceremony. I think some people still do it anyway, but you're not allowed to do that. That is illegal. You can't raise children without education in the name of religion. There was conflict. This actually went all the way up to the Supreme Court. There was a conflict with the Amish culture. If you know the Amish culture, they're the ones, they mostly live in Pennsylvania, parts of Ohio on the East Coast. They drive those black buggies. They pretty much dress all in black. The men wear beards. They reject all technology. So no electricity, no internet, no cell phones. They want to live a very simple life. And part of that simplicity means not having formalized education. That ultimately, there were some Amish sects, some portions of the Amish community that were not sending their children to school at all. They got in trouble with the law in Pennsylvania. There was ultimately a case called the Yoder case, where it was finally determined that the Amish must send their children up to school up until 8th grade. And then once 8th grade is over, then the men, again, it's a very traditional society. Men learn how to do labor. They work on a farm and they work with their hands and they build, the Amish can build amazing barns and homes. And so they teach their boys the traditional male role activities like farming, like carpentry, those types of skills. And they teach their girls very traditional gender role for women. They teach them sewing, they teach them cooking, they teach them how to take care of a home, how to take care of children. Older girls take care of their younger siblings. And so, so you can't just completely deny your kids an education just because your religion says so. That's why compromises have been made. That's why there's homeschool now. That's why there are religious schools. Kids need to get an education, but because of people's religious beliefs, they've come to like a compromise so that if you want to raise your children with a certain set of beliefs and have an education that aligns with your beliefs, then there are a lot of different ways today that you can do that. And you cannot deprive children of basic needs either. If there were a religious belief system that said that fasting, for example, we know that so there are some Christians who fast under certain circumstances. Muslims fast during the month of Ramadan, but neither those Christians nor the Muslims nor anybody else could force children to fast, right? And I don't think that happens. But if there were a belief system where it was considered part of your faith to force children to fast or deprive them of other basic needs, you can't do that either in the name of religion. Okay. Wisconsin versus Yoder. That was the Supreme Court case that I was talking about. And then we talked about the peyote, smoking peyote as well, the hallucinogenic drug. You can't claim that as, it's not allowed under the free exercise clause. Okay. Hey, we're moving now. We've switched, moved. We've done freedom of speech. We've done freedom of religion. Now let's talk about freedom of the press. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of the press. So the press, as you know, is the media, right? The reason why we call it the press goes back to the Gutenberg days. You learned about Johann Gutenberg in 7th grade history, the inventor of the movable type printing press, right? Where you take the ink, you have the letters, you set them down in a tray, you put the ink on there, then you set the paper down, and then you push down the press. That's why the media, newspapers, and today TV, radio, internet, internet news, they're still called the press. And so we call that freedom of the press. So here's what the media can do. They can print any political position, not in every country, but here in the United States, they are free to publish a variety of different political opinions. You can make fun of people, especially politicians. We know, actually, let me just go back up here for a moment, because there are claims currently, there are some Twitter accounts that are being shut down. President Trump, his Twitter account was shut down. There are other people who are supporters of the president who have been speaking out recently here in late 2020, early 2021 about the 2020 election being stolen, and basically essentially sharing misinformation because this has been settled in state legislatures and in courts all across the country in over 60 different Supreme Court cases. The presidential election was not stolen. And so for that reason, and also because Twitter believed that President Trump his speech could potentially incite further violence, like the violence that we saw on January 6, 2021, President Trump's Twitter account was revoked, along with his Facebook account, Instagram. Now, some people are like, wait a minute, isn't that denying the president or the president's supporters freedom of speech or freedom of the press? Whoa, what's going on here? The reason why it's not is because it's not the government silencing the president. It is a private business that is silencing the president. It is Twitter as a private business that is deciding, you know what? You don't get to use our service anymore. It would just be like if you're at the mall and if you are being loud and obnoxious and yelling and like making a scene at the mall while other people they're trying to shop. And the mall security says, you know what? No, I'm sorry. You gotta leave. You gotta go. And you're like, no, this is a public place. This is my freedom of speech. What? My free speech rights are being denied. What? You can't do this. This is America. Well, no, they can do it because it's private property. The mall is private property. You can't just say or do whatever you want at the mall. If you want to go to a public park and you would like to announce whatever it is you want to announce and talk about your beliefs and opinions, that's fine. That's public park. But when you are on private property, it's different. So you can't just cause a scene, make a fuss, and disturb people at the mall. It's private property. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, it's private property. And so you can't do that. So in case you were wondering, like, wait, why are the president's rights being denied? They're not being denied by the government. They're being denied by a private company. And so those aren't protected rights. Your rights are not protected when you're at the mall. Your rights are not protected when you're on Twitter. It's a private platform. Okay. You can make fun of people, especially politicians. You watch any late night talk show host, Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, Saturday Night Live. They make fun of politicians all the time. And you can't do that in every country. As a matter of fact, here's an example. In China, and this is, I can show you an example here. Let me stop my screen share. So in China, it's a much more repressive country, China, and the leader of China right now, Xi Jinping. Let me just show you a picture of Xi Jinping here, and let me do a screen share so you can see this. So this is Xi Jinping, the leader of China. China's a communist country. It's a repressive regime. They crack down on free speech. Like, you definitely do not have the freedoms in China that you do in the United States. So this is President Xi Jinping of China. Now, there was somebody who said, you know what? Xi Jinping kind of looks like a beloved cartoon character. And so they started making comparisons between Xi Jinping and Winnie the Pooh. And so, they started making fun of President Xi Jinping, comparing him to Winnie the Pooh. the Chinese government banned that. In other words, there were people, people in China who were making fun of him, and actually people from all over the world who were making fun of him, comparing him to looking like Winnie the Pooh. If you were in China on social media, their version of Twitter is called Weibo. If you're on Weibo or another social media platform, you will not see any comparisons at all from within China or outside of China between their president and Winnie the Pooh. It's banned. So essentially, in China, it is banned to make fun of their president. Now, here in the United States, we couldn't imagine a system like that. Of course, that's part of being an American, is being able to make fun of your leaders. People make fun of President Trump all the time. People were critical, made fun of President Obama. People made fun of President George W. Bush, of Bill Clinton. Like, that's just part of what we do as part of our freedom of speech and freedom of the press, is freedom of the media. We make fun of our leaders. That's something that's a very American thing to do. But in China, it's not allowed. You can expose wrongs by the government. You can say things, and people can say things that you might not agree with. And it is protected speech by the government. Now, again, there are examples, current examples, where the platform Parler, for example, this is a conservative social media platform that was created because people were dissatisfied with Twitter, and conservatives were unhappy with with certain rules that Twitter, Facebook, other social media platforms were creating, and so they created Parler. Well, Parler does not have their own server. Parler, the conservative social media platform, relies on Amazon, AWS, Amazon Web Services, for their for their infrastructure, for their technology infrastructure. And so when Amazon believed that Parler, there was speech on Parler that they deemed as essentially trying to incite the events that happened on January 6th, and possibly trying to incite further violence to disrupt the inauguration, or possible violence at state capitals on January 20th. And so Amazon just said, you know what, we're revoking. Amazon pulled the server rights, again, because they're a private company. They can do that. And Parler had an agreement with Amazon. There's a contract, and Amazon says that Parler violated the contract. Somewhere in the contract, I'm sure it says something about you can't incite violence, you can't promote violence on our platform. And so Amazon pulled their infrastructure services from Parler, which, again, the people on Parler were unhappy with. But that's not the government doing it. It is not the government taking speech rights away. It is a private company saying, you violated the contract, and so we are taking that away. If Parler believes that they're being wronged, if Parler believes that they did not violate that contract, then they can take Amazon to court and they can settle it. Again, that's why we have the judicial branch, to settle these disputes. Did Amazon breach the contract with Parler? If they did, well, then they're going to owe Parler millions or billions of dollars. But if they didn't breach the contract, then it was within Amazon's rights to pull access for Parler. Okay. Here's what the media can't do. You can't commit libel. In other words, you cannot intentionally injure a person's reputation with false facts. You cannot disclose defense security secrets. This has come up with a couple of people. Julian Assange, who was the founder of WikiLeaks, he released defense secrets, United States defense secrets. He can never come back into the United States without facing arrest. Same thing with a man named Edward Snowden. You can look up Edward Snowden. He was a former defense contractor who also released defense secrets, and he can't, and he published those or released them for somebody else to publish, and he can't ever come back. I think he's in exile in Russia right now, because if he ever comes back to the United States, then he is going to be arrested as well. So we have a lot of freedoms, but we don't have total freedom in the United States. Okay, let's talk about the right to petition. So Congress shall make no law abridging the people to petition the government for redress of grievances. In other words, your right to petition means you can say to the government, we want change. They don't have this right in all countries, but we have it here in our country. So you can speak out against the government, gather others who share your opinion, actually have people. In the old days, it was sign a petition on paper. Today, it's signing petitions online. You also cannot be published for exposing wrongs by the government. There are whistleblower laws that protect you if you are a government employee or government contractor. This is where the Edward Snowden thing is a little bit of a gray area. If you look into the life of Edward Snowden, he believes that he's a whistleblower. He believes that he was right to expose the bad things that the United States government was doing. But the United States government doesn't see it that way. So ultimately, Edward Snowden might get his day in court. He might be considered a whistleblower rather than a criminal. But right now, the United States government deems Edward Snowden a criminal. Okay. Let's talk about freedom of assembly. You'll notice over here on the left-hand side, picture of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That was the March on Washington in August of 1963. You'll see over here on the right side, that was the Ignite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia in 2017. Dr. Martin Luther King fighting for equality and justice over here on the left. Over here on the right, the Ignite the Right rally fighting for the rights of white people, essentially, trying to assert the supremacy of white people in the United States. So very different causes, but both are protected under freedom of assembly. Here's what you can do. You can protest, you can parade, you can gather chanting hate slogans if you want at the Ignite the Right rally here. One of the chants that was heard very clearly was, "Jews will not control us." There is within white supremacy circles, there is this belief that somehow that people of the Jewish faith or Jewish culture are out to control America. Which is patently false. It's racist. It's racist, and it is biased. It is based on bias and discrimination and prejudice against people of the Jewish faith. Sadly, the Jews have faced discrimination and prejudice for thousands of years. But that was one of their slogans that they were chanting. Now, is it nice? Is it fair? No, it absolutely is not. But it's their protected speech. And so as long as you are peaceably assembling, and that Unite the Right rally started peacefully, it didn't end peacefully, but it started peacefully, then you can say that. You can chant hate slogans if you gather in a group. There's even been a court case that protects gang members' ability to congregate in public. So as long as you're gathering peacefully, then you can assemble, which you can't do. You cannot protest by throwing rocks or breaking windows or trespassing. So the events that happened over the summer in response to the police killing of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, there was an outcry in the summer of 2020 that led to mostly peaceful protests in cities across the United States. However, some of those peaceful protests, there were some protesters who became violent. And that's when you break the law. So you can peaceably assemble, you can peacefully march for justice, you can peacefully march for police reform. But when you start throwing rocks, breaking windows, when you start harming police who are trying to just protect the city, protect property, then that's when you're breaking the law. Then that we don't, the United States, we as a country do not condone acts of violence in the name of, peaceful assembly. You can't hang out on private land against the owner's will, loitering. That's the mall thing again, right? If you're going to gather at the mall, you can't just decide that you're going to hang out and say, well, no, it's a public place, so I can hang out if I want to. Nope. Mall security, the mall cops can say, nope, get out of here, you teenagers. And they can do that because it's private property. And then there are certain city ordinances where that say that you can't loiter if you're under 18. So there are additional restrictions on minors as well. All right. We just finished with the First Amendment. Now we're going to get into 2, 4, 5, 6, and 8. The Second Amendment, the right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia, this is the quote from the Second Amendment, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to bear arms shall not be infringed. This has been a hot-button amendment throughout our history. So here's the debate, the questions that we ask. What types of weapons should the government reasonably keep from its citizens? Or should we keep any kind of weapons at all? Should Americans be allowed to own whatever kind of weapons they want? Handguns, I think that most Americans probably agree that Americans should have the right to own a handgun. That's pretty universal. Most Americans agree on that. Rifles, hunting rifles, I would say the same thing. Most Americans agree on that. Machine guns, well, that's when Americans start to disagree on whether or not all Americans should have the right to own a machine gun or grenades or nuclear weapons. I don't know of any reasonable American who would say, you know what? Yes, we as Americans should have the right to own nuclear weapons that can kill millions of people, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people. So most of us would agree that handguns should be allowed. Most of us would agree that nuclear weapons should not be allowed. So it's where we meet in the middle. It's where we kind of come together, and it's that gray area in between where we have the conflict. automatic, semi-automatic weapons, what should be allowed. We have to ask ourselves, what was the intent of the founders? Like when our founders wrote the Second Amendment in 1791, what were they thinking? Because in 1791, the deadliest weapon was a cannon. It could kill a maximum of 20 people per minute. And today, the deadliest gun can fire over 1,000 rounds per minute. So you can literally kill thousands of people in the same amount of time that you could, with a cannon in 1791, you could kill 20 people. So so that's why we have the debate today, because what they wrote in 1791, does it still apply to us in the modern day? Just a little bit more on the gun debate. One side says thousands of people die every year because of gun violence, and guns are considerably more powerful today than they were in the time of the founders. However, there's the other side that supports gun rights and wants to promote or expand gun rights. They say, you know what? Thousands of crimes are prevented because of guns. If you walk into a convenience store and if you're a criminal, you intend on robbing that convenience store, but you know that the owner is armed and has a shotgun behind the counter, are you more or less likely to rob that convenience store? Well, you're probably less likely. If you think you're going to get shot, you're probably less likely to commit that crime and rob that liquor store, rob that convenience store. So there is that argument that gun ownership leads to a reduction of crime because you're not going to mess with me if I own a gun. And then also there's the other claim that says, societies in history that have taken guns away, like Nazi Germany, which took guns away from its citizens, they cease to be free societies. So when you gather up and you take away all the guns from people, then we would cease to be a free country. So you can see there are both sides to this argument here. And you can look at these political cartoons. I have shared this slideshow with you. I'm not going to spend any time talking about these, but it kind of addresses both sides of the argument over gun rights and gun control. Okay, let's talk about the Third Amendment. Actually, I'm going to skip over this because this is not one of those on your sheet. It's important. All of the amendments are important, but and this was important to the founders at the time. No quartering soldiers in troops. No quartering soldiers. You can't house troops in people's homes and force them to do it if it's a time of peace. This was a response to the Quartering Act. Remember when the British forced American colonists to house British soldiers? They didn't like that, and so they wanted a rule to protect that. The government isn't doing that. The government isn't housing soldiers in people's homes today, so this rarely comes up in court. But here's what does come up in court. The Fourth Amendment. Fourth Amendment is about search and seizure. So if you're going to write 2 words, you should write more than 2 words, but if you're going to write 2 words on the Fourth Amendment in your notes, search and seizure. What does a law enforcement officer need in order to search your home? A warrant given to him by a judge or probable cause. You need a warrant and probable cause as well, excuse me. A warrant given by a judge, a search warrant, and then probable cause in order to obtain that search warrant. Here's when police do not need a warrant. If you give consent to the search, if you allow police into your home, then you're giving consent. If it's a plain view search, if they can see illegal activity going on through the window, that's a plain view search. If it's a search incident to arrest, so in other words, they pull you over in your car and they're searching your car, which they're allowed to do if they have probable cause, if you've been swerving, and they find illegal drugs or they find open containers of alcohol, then that's a legal search or a protective sweep search. So police are allowed, for their own protection, they're allowed to pat you down when you get arrested. If they pat you down and they find a baggie of cocaine on you, then you can't say, well, no, I didn't let them reach into my pockets. I didn't allow that. Well, no, it was a protective sweep search, and so it was allowed. Under the courts, it is allowed, and so you can be held accountable for that. Okay, that was the Fourth Amendment. The Fifth Amendment, you cannot be tried for the same crime twice. That's called double jeopardy. You don't have to testify against yourself. When you hear the phrase, I plead the Fifth, that means that you're saying, you know what, I don't want to incriminate myself. And so this is your right to remain silent. You have the right to remain silent. That is your Fifth Amendment right. Due process, those are your due process rights as well. Every American is guaranteed due process of law if they are accused of a crime. Every American. Due process just means you're going to get treated the same way that other people get treated. Due process of law. That's a guarantee under the Fifth Amendment. And then it's also a guarantee that the state The state governments, the Fifth Amendment is federal government, United States government. 14th Amendment says state governments also have to treat everybody the same equally and give them their due process under the law. And then finally, eminent domain, which we're not even going to talk about, but that's also in the Fifth Amendment as well. That's a discussion for another day. The Sixth Amendment, these are more rights of the accused. The Sixth Amendment has your right to a speedy trial, the right to a public trial. In other words, the government can't just like delay your trial or drag it out for years and years and years. You are guaranteed the right to a speedy trial, right? We gotta get the ball rolling. Now, depending on the severity of the crime that you're accused of, it may take a few weeks to a few months for your trial to begin. That's because your attorney is given the opportunity to gather evidence and make a case for your defense. The prosecution, the government, the district attorney is given time to gather evidence to incriminate you. So speedy trial means if it's a lesser crime that you're being accused of, get it done in a matter of weeks. If it's a greater crime, it might be a matter of months, but your trial is not going to be dragged out years and years and years, and you sit in jail waiting for your trial. That can happen because of your Sixth Amendment rights. Right to a public trial. In some other countries, trials are held in secret. Trials are held in basements. Trials are held behind closed doors where the media can't watch and the public can't watch. Your family can't come to watch. It's shady in other countries. Here in our country, you have the right to a public trial if you're accused of a crime. And then finally, the right to a trial by an impartial jury of your peers. So right to trial by jury is another thing, not guaranteed in every country, but guaranteed in ours. Just expanding on the Sixth Amendment, you must be told of your charges. So you can't just, and this is part of your habeas corpus rights as well. You need to be told what you're being accused of, what crime you're being accused of. You have the right to confront witnesses in open court. So if somebody accuses you of something, it can't just be like, well, yeah, they told me, somebody told me. That's secondhand information. That's not admissible. That's called hearsay. If someone is going to accuse you, they believe that you did it, they witness you doing it, then they have to appear in court to testify openly in court that they saw you do it. If you're going to accuse someone of a crime, you have the right to subpoena witnesses in your favor. So if someone, you're being accused of robbing a bank and you're like, no, I was in Idaho at the time. Well, if there was someone in Idaho who saw you there in Idaho, then you can force them to come to court to testify in your favor and say, oh yeah, I saw them. Yes. So just like you have to confront witnesses who testify against you, you also have the right to subpoena witnesses who can speak, who can help prove your innocence. Although you do not need to be proven innocent. It is not your burden if you're accused of a crime. It's not your burden to prove your innocence. It is the government's burden to prove that you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And then finally, you must be provided a lawyer if you cannot afford one. So if you remember the Miranda case, right? That's Fifth and Sixth Amendments, because Fifth Amendment, your right to remain silent, and your Sixth Amendment rights, the right to an attorney if you cannot afford one. And so in the Miranda case, that's when the Supreme Court said, you know what, in that particular case, Ernesto Miranda was denied his Fifth Amendment rights and his Sixth Amendment rights when he was arrested. And so they had to do their trial all over again. Okay, and then finally, the Eighth Amendment, no excessive bail, no cruel and unusual punishment. So in other words, if you are accused of shoplifting, then bail that's the guarantee that you're going to show up in court. So you can't be held for $1 million bail if you're accused of stealing a pack of gum. Same thing with cruel and unusual punishment. You cannot be thrown in 30 years in prison for stealing a pack of gum. Bail has to be appropriate to the crime. The punishment needs to be appropriate to the crime as well. Okay. And then just some final notes here, some final thoughts. These are in the Bill of Rights. They just don't appear in the courts as often. And they're important. The Third Amendment, the Seventh Amendment, Ninth and 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment is hugely important in our government for other reasons. It basically says that those powers not given to the government may be reserved by the states. It also or to the people. It also reinforces the concept of federalism, this idea of the balance between the power of the United States government and the state governments. And there's more to it, but I've already talked a lot. So they're important. They're just they don't come up a lot in like Supreme Court cases, which is why I'm not mentioning them as much or talking about them. Also, what's not in the Bill of Rights, slavery, was never mentioned anywhere in the Bill of Rights. It will later be abolished in the 13th Amendment. So that's not part of the Bill of Rights. Voting rights, your right to vote, nobody's right to vote is mentioned at all in the Bill of Rights. Voting rights will be protected later in the 15th Amendment, the 19th, and the 26th Amendments. And I'm also, you know what, there's the poll tax amendment, which is 23, 24. I should have mentioned the 24th Amendment also. So 15th Amendment, which allowed all African Americans to vote. Voting shall not be denied based on the color of your skin. 19th Amendment allowed women to vote. 24th Amendment, I think, eliminated the poll tax. The poll tax was being used particularly in the southern states to deny African Americans the right to vote. If you couldn't pay your poll tax, then you couldn't vote. And then the 26th Amendment lowered the voting age from 21 to 18. The right to a public education is not guaranteed anywhere in the Constitution. That's just something that we have interpreted, or that we've kind of built up over time. And then finally, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not in the Constitution. That's in the Declaration of Independence. Okay. Wow, we've talked so much, some good stuff. I hope that you learned quite a bit about the Bill of Rights and what they mean, particularly what they mean to you as an American. And I hope that when all is said and done, you have this in your mind, that you have certain rights under the Constitution, and you should fight for those rights. But we also have certain responsibilities as Americans to be respectful of others, to respect others' rights, and I would say a responsibility to just to be kind to each other as well. All right, that is all I have for you. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoyed learning about the. Oh, let me stop my share. Hope you enjoyed learning about the Bill of Rights. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye bye.